All right, well, thank you for coming to our twice a year UACEP meeting. We, as a committee, a year ago decided that we would try cutting back from our quarterly meetings because we're just so cool and everything is running so smoothly here in the state of Utah that we just felt like having 4 meetings a year was overkill. So we pulled back to 2, and then we decided last year in March at our state concurrent enrollment conference that we would not do a state conference this year because of why? Yes! The national conference is coming to Salt Lake City in October. So let's kind of bring you up to speed a little bit on that. But before we do, I'm Beth Rhodes, and I am the co-chair with Jared Ferguson for UACEP. I am from Weber State University, and Jared is down in, he has a new school now. UCAS, yes?
Is it the second campus of UCAS?
Second campus of UCAS. Jared is the principal. Jared, sadly, has been super sick since Thanksgiving. And so he gets better, and then he gets really sick again, and then he gets better, and today he's sick again. So he is not with us, and he sends his deepest regrets and much love for his public ed secondary partners. So Holly Handy is here. Holly Handy is here. She is our treasurer for UACEP. She also represents Davis School District, so she will be the one who will be heading up the secondary partners breakout session. Okay, updates on our, if you want to get into the Wi-Fi, the bottom bullet is the password. It is all lowercase. So if you're struggling to get in, now you know, lowercase works.
There's no O in it.
And there's no O, that's just the bullet. To be clear. Okay, so a couple of things for our October conference. I am on the planning committee for the national organization, and I just want to update you that the conference will be October 14th and 15th at the Salt Lake City Center Marriott. And there is a pre-conference on Sunday the 13th and a post-conference activity on Wednesday the 16th. So definitely go and check out the NACEP National Conference website because they are starting to post some of these items. Registration is open. If you need to start getting permissions and planning for next year's travel, hopefully your districts will let you attend because it's so close. And those of you who are in the greater Salt Lake area don't even need hotel accommodations. You could ride front runner and tracks and just jump off at the city center station. Okay, the post-conference activities, Holly Handy is in charge of those, and they're planning some site visits to some high schools in the Davis County area. And so that'll be fun to showcase the brand new high school, Farmington High School, to some of our national friends, how we're doing concurrent enrollment in the state of Utah. Brandon is leading our outdoor conversation. So Brandon, where are you? And he is trying to decide between a 15-mile hike up Timpanogos or, just kidding. Just kidding. So if you want to do outdoor conversations, Brandon's going to lead us on that during October, which will be a great month to be outside in Utah. Okay, any other quick, those of you who have signed up to maybe be on the review committee for proposals, all of the proposals should have been submitted by March 8th. How many did submit a proposal? Okay, perfect. We wanted to load the NACEP proposal website with stuff from Utah, so hopefully they have lots from us. They actually did get 150 proposals, and so those of you who are on the review board, you will be getting an email in the next week or two and to start reviewing those proposals. And then those of you who did submit a proposal, you will find out by April 30th whether or not your proposal was selected. We okay with that? Okay, super. Okay, any other questions right now about the conference, the national conference in October? Perfect. All right, we are going to have some quick legislative updates because most of these legislative updates are going to be discussed in the breakout sessions today, especially for higher ed. We have some things to tackle. So higher ed will be working a little bit more on this. So these are just general overview updates.
Now we have to have the introductory speech.
Okay.
I'm going to talk to you about two bills and then mention one that got away at the end. And I look forward to telling you briefly what the bills do. And then I'd like to say, do you have any thoughts, any questions, any observations, any suggestions? But they will wind up carrying forward into the breakout session. First bill, House Bill 146, Concurrent Enrollment Amendments. Very creative titles here. It does two things. Up to this point, we've said student eligibility. Students are eligible in 11th and 12th grade, 9th and 10th by exception. And it takes out by exception, and it says that 9th through 12th graders are eligible for participation in concurrent enrollment. That was my look. The other thing it does is it changes the language, one word, from high school to public school. And one of the reasons that could be is, I suppose, that there are, I never understand the difference between junior high and middle school, but there are high schools that are 9 through 12. There are high schools that are 10 through 12, and where the 9th grade is in another school. So that's what it does. And let's look at the second one. House Bill 291, Concurrent Enrollment Modifications, does two things with subpoints. It sets academic qualifications in statute to be an adjunct for concurrent enrollment. And it specifies, it makes a distinction between non-CTE courses and CTE courses, right? Automotive versus art. And it directs the State Board of Regents to identify CTE courses. This is going to be hard because we just need to use the core codes, right? To create a process for LEAs to appeal a decision. If you have a teacher that you think should be teaching a class and you go to your local institution and they do not approve that, we are supposed to develop a process, or we will be developing a process for you to appeal that decision if you feel strongly about it. And the other thing it does is create a process for LEAs and institutions to determine a teacher is no longer qualified. This doesn't happen very often, I know, but every once in a while, it never happens in higher ed, by the way. Only in public ed, you get a teacher who's not that great. Okay, higher ed, we're perfect. But in fact, previously, it had said anyone who taught concurrent enrollment in certain years was grandfathered in perpetuity. And what this says is if there's reasons that the LEA and the institution agree. I'm aware of one example in the entire state this year that we don't want to have this person teaching concurrent again. There's going to be a process for you to make that decision and not have to grandfather that person. The significance, and this is, I'll give this, we'll put it on utahce.org and I'll give it to, we'll send it out to you. I want you to see what it said about the qualifications to teach a course. And there's two parts. One is an academic award and/or what is called in statute qualifying experience. In higher ed, generally speaking, the rule of thumb is you have 1 degree higher than what you're teaching. If you're teaching bachelor level courses, you have a master's. If you're teaching associate level courses only, you might have a bachelor's. And so that's a rule of thumb. But what we say is there's exceptions for CTE. Is there a bachelor's degree in automotive? Yes.
Where? Where?
Weaver State.
Shh. You're supposed to say no. Okay. Is there a bachelor's degree in, I can't think of another example. Thanks, Beth.
Yes.
Welding.
Yes, there is.
Welding?
At Weaver State.
Hey, we welders, not a mechanic. We're really good people. Come on.
Dang it. Well, I lied to Representative Winder. Please don't tell him. I told him there was no such thing in the system.
I didn't correct you.
Thank you very much. If you have a degree where the highest award is an AAS, then you need to have that AAS. And in a lot of cases, a terminal associate degree. In a lot of those cases, you may also have someone teaching courses who's got years of experience as a welder or a carpenter. Are there degrees in, oh yeah, there are. That's not a good example either. And or have ASC certifications. So those things will count. In the general ed world, this is the most interesting. And 74% of our earned credits, general ed,
It's a master's degree in the discipline or a master's degree in a related field with 18 credits in the discipline. So we do, CTE is cool. We're trying with CTE. When we talked about qualifying experience, we actually looked at colleges and universities are accredited by 7 regional accreditors, and we looked at those 7 to see what they were doing, and we came up with a list that includes years of teaching experience, that you have endorsements, that you've got scholarship, perhaps that you've got professional certifications, you have a portfolio of work like in art, you're a world-class photographer. And you may have endorsements, professional endorsements. And I know talking to Kristen Campbell and I talked to Jonathan for a minute here, these are the kind of things that USBE looks at for alternative routes to licensure. So these things may work as a qualifying experience. Now, if you followed this bill, you know that it started out by saying the Board of Regents shall establish a statewide uniform policy. And I hope it was made very clear to our sponsor that by allowing us to have qualifying experience, there is still some stuff subject to interpretation by a department chair who's got to look at that and go, yep, that meets our standards, that works for us. And he was told that and he understands that. And it is for that reason that we have to have this policy for arbitration if in fact you don't like the decision that was made. I'm very hopeful for this bill. Tell you one more. The bill that got away, and the only reason I'm telling you about it is for the next slide. At the very last minute, a representative introduced House Bill 488, and it would do 2 things. One is it said once a year the Board of Regents shall approve a list of courses, upper division courses to be offered for concurrent enrollment. I don't honestly think that, with the exception of our bridge courses, which are 3,000 level world languages courses, that we would ever be offering 3,000 and 4,000 level courses for concurrent. I mean, I don't know that there's an appetite for it, but it's in there. But the other thing it did was change how concurrent is funded. And right now, it goes up every year, so you get more money every year, but it's based on K-12 growth. And I had never looked at this before, but I want you to pat yourselves on the back. On the left, that's the growth of the K-12 population in the last 4 years, to 1.1% last year. But look at the concurrent enrollment program, and look what you people are doing to get more kids in high school earning college credit at $5 a piece. Pretty impressive. And that's kind of why our money kind of is going like this, south. So hopefully we can provide data to Representative Hutchins, and hopefully he won't wait till the last Friday of ledge session next year to introduce this bill again and see if we can get additional funding for our program. Just to begin with, does anyone have a universal comment or question about 9th through 12th graders or qualifying for faculty that we should be thinking about in our breakouts?
My question was, do we still, since there isn't that wording by exception anymore, do we still do different things for those, to qualify those 9th and 10th graders?
Does anyone have a thought on that?
They have to meet the requirements for the course. But like, we used to make them take a test.
So
Submit all kinds of stuff.
this is Sid's opinion, okay, only. In the core code list, and I always thought this was a Bible, and I'm told now it's only a guideline, but in core codes, there's a date range for all classes, or grade range, right? And this course can be offered from 9th through 12th, 10th through 12th, a couple of them are 12th grade only. And I think some of our institutions also have grade limits on courses. And they say, and that's based on, in the most part, you guys, what faculty say. And I always use this example, I'm sorry, Introduction to Criminal Justice. And the topics that are covered in that, or even Poli-Sci 1100, I think that the topics will lend themselves better to an older kid who's been on the earth longer and developed more life experience. And so the one thing I can say is that if we go the route of saying here's the grades that we recommend for courses, and we don't have a process to let the next Einstein take a science course or the next Ansel Adams take a photography course, we'll be back again next year with whatever the bill is called. So this is something we have to work out. I think that I was a helicopter parent. Now, I did not think my child was the next Einstein, but I think that there are far more many parents on the earth who think their child is ready for college instruction than maybe students. And so we need to collectively talk about how to address that issue with younger students. And it's got to be more than just taking the word exception off the exception policy form, okay?
I would love to hear somebody's comment on that from public ed, from K through 12. What are
Do you have a problem with the processes that have been in place? Were they onerous and you didn't like them?
Well, no ninth graders should be taking a college class. They're not ready. Our sophomores struggle with it. We gave them and
Sorry.
I don't know, because I am just the peon that manages concurrent enrollment in our high school. But I'm dealing with the parents at the high school level. They still can't let go. And the fact that a ninth grader's parent is going to have to sign off on a FERPA, how's that going to go over? And how are we going to get a junior high teacher willing to teach a college course at that level? And the students might be wanting to take it, but socially, they're just not ready. They're not ready to do the work, the rigor, or anything else where those classes are concerned.
And my question was, is it gonna limit, I mean, are we talking foreign language classes, some of the, like, are we limiting which ones are open to ninth graders, or is it open for
Any other classes?
To be determined. But we didn't pay you for that answer, and I think that we are on the same page with that response. Yes.
Well, then you're gonna throw apples at me and rotten fruit.
Oh, dear.
We had
I'll
just a
stand
handful.
back.
You're talking about the next Ansel Adams or the next
Yeah.
scientist. We have a few of those in our classes. We had about 4 ninth graders or 5.
Sure.
And they were the top of the class, like literally 100% almost on, you know what I mean? So, but we had screened them. We said they had to have a 3.5. We said they had to have a, you know,
Listen,
I don't know.
last year you had 36,335 students take concurrent, 109 freshmen, 3,970 sophomores, somewhere around 11 or 12,000 juniors and 19,000 seniors. And I could see 109 exceptional students taking a course.
So let me go back to our ninth graders. So we have Chinese bridge at our high school. And we had originally 35 students. There are 10 kids that made it into it, period.
Okay.
The parents were obviously distraught and upset that their kids did not pass that AP test come the summer. And now they're trying to rework to help they're now sophomores. But they just weren't ready.
One more comment.
The next course in the pathway is AP, and so they should go right into 10th grade AP, and that's an appropriate placement for that student, and there's nothing just horribly wrong, or, you know.
But you
that is
come and explain that to the parents who are winning.
I'd be happy to.
All right, I want to ask about the other bills. So turning, what I sense is that we all agree that we want what's best for students. We want the students to be prepared to be successful and have a complete experience. We want faculty to feel that they're not having to compromise their teaching because maybe they have younger students. That's a higher ed perspective. But there are still exceptional people in the state. And I think, speaking for the institutions, I think they really rely on their partners in public ed who know the students far better than we do to identify those folks, which is why we have to come up with something and hopefully involve the sponsor of the bill in what we're thinking so that she doesn't think that we're not sensitive to what the issue she brought up. Okay? What do you think about faculty qualifications? A degree, experience, and the ability, if you're not happy with the outcome, to talk to someone about it. Yes?
Yeah, I want to clarify that, because if we had a teacher that we feel is qualified to teach a specific subject, say it's chemistry,
Cool.
and we have a guy that we know is qualified, like his middle name is chemistry, but we're kind of shot down because he doesn't have a couple of the classes that the college requires. And so my question is does this address that so that we can sit down
Yeah.
and figure this out?
It will, yes. It will. It will not give you, it would be,
We don't want the
yes.
power to slam the university and say, well, you have to, because that wouldn't be fair
You
to
can't-
them, obviously.
you can't make them. It wouldn't
You can't
work.
make them, but
Yeah.
guess, what does this do? I mean, how can we appeal?
The appeals process has to be worked out up to this point. You know how we have an RFR process, right? So we have that process. We still want you to go to your local institution first, say,
Right.
here's what we want to teach, here's what we've got. talk through the qualifications. And we have something like 1,800 people teaching concurrent enrollment, and the great, at least 86%, I like numbers, I'm sorry, 86% of the credit was taught by a teacher who's an adjunct, right? So the majority of those people are just fine. But when we come to these sticking points, what has to happen is if your local says no, you're going to have to come to the Board of Regents. That's what the sponsor wants. Now, what that means, I'm not giving out my cell phone number. What that means is yet to be determined. But what he didn't want, and I think we agree because we are a system for higher education, is we don't want a situation where one institution says no and the other embraces you and gives you the prize parking spot by the door to the building. So in instances where we have those sticking points and qualifications, we need to work them out. And the sticking points are undoubtedly probably not going to be in the degree you have, they're going to be in the qualifying experiences. And it will probably have to somehow have an opportunity for department chair groups to talk amongst themselves. And we have till July 1st to give you a complete answer to your question. But it doesn't mean that every person that you propose is going to get approved. I mean, but it means that will be, the process of how you make that determination will be more consistent across all 8 institutions. Is that a good answer for today?
Yeah, it does, it is, thank you.
Okay.
Absolutely.
I just have a question. With the ninth graders, if you have a teacher that's teaching your concurrent class, does that fall on the junior highs to make sure they have, like, to get the teachers approved as adjunct, or who's that falling on?
According to statute, board rule, and state and board rule and region policy, the identification of people to teach concurrent is a group effort between the LEA and the institution. But the decision of who gets approved is an institution decision, because basically we're giving you college credit, so they get the final say, but it's collaborative to identify. I don't even know, when we talk about junior highs and middle schools, I don't believe, is there a single concurrent course taught outside of a high school today? I don't know there is. So that's another topic of conversation, is are we going to have more locations where concurrent is offered? And I don't know the answer to that. Are we going to have more people in teaching not at the senior high schools, I guess they're called senior high schools, who have the endorsements to teach the secondary course? That's that's new territory for me. So, but ultimately, you propose, you talk about it with the institution, but the institution does have the final say. It's their credit. Yes, ma'am. This is the last question, and then we'll have a really good breakout sessions.
I think we need to be careful because we say, hey, we're all maybe under Northwest, but a lot of our colleges or schools or even departments have very specific accreditations that we, in fact, one of ours, which is through ABET, got a ding this year because of how CE was running. We had to make some changes to help them. So it isn't just Northwest. A lot of times our colleges and schools have very specific specialized things that they've worked hard to receive, and to jeopardize that.
Well, Lindsay makes a point that all the institutions are accredited by the Northwest Commission of Colleges and Universities, but there's things called specialty accreditations, if for nursing or for business or for other things that sit on top of it. It's not black and white. It's also the case, I think that this bill sponsor didn't realize also that it's not just us. You have to have the right endorsements. We've had some sticky wickets in this valley with communication classes that have a CTE or a language arts endorsement. I can't remember the details, but we have
Library science.
yeah, they have to meet both sets of the fence, so to speak. So the answer is talk amongst yourselves, talk back together, and a process will evolve that will work, and by July 1st, I'm very excited. Yeah.
I just wanted to mention, we have a lot of teachers that would like to do concurrent and are very qualified to do it,
Right?
but because they don't have the money, financial ability to go get a master's or the time to go get a master's with the way that has to be, so they're switching to AP. You're still accepting that credit in the universities from the AP if they pass the test, but you're saying that teacher's okay, because the only qualification, or the only thing they have to do to teach AP is get the principal to approve it. Like concurrent enrollment.
Well, they have to do AP training, don't they? I mean, isn't there like, I'm not as familiar as I should be.
But
Yes,
that's different than going and getting a master's.
yes, it is. And that's why a level 4 endorsement qualifies you to teach concurrent math. That was the argument used in Senate Bill 196 4 years ago. I don't have an answer to this thing, but my final comment is this. I am 61 years old. And I want to retire in a couple of years. And I want us to be able to have bills in the legislature that are not homework assignments thrust on us, but things where we say, here's some ways you can help us. We're doing a good job, we could do better. And so I have a feeling you need to talk more in the 2 breakouts. We need to gather information, maybe even do something like a state survey to ask questions like yours. I mean, in math, there's 1,200 people with a level 4 endorsement in math, but only 150 or 60 of them teach concurrent math. Why is that? We did a survey. Let's do a bigger survey to gather more data. And I'm hoping some magic bullet that I haven't figured out or we haven't figured out comes forward and that we can progress. Okay, I'm going to stop and I'm going to turn the time to our 2 speakers who have come from out of state on this horrible, rainy, yucky day in Utah. I told them I thought it would be sunny today. That was a fib. So I would very much like to introduce 2 speakers who are coming to speak to you about working with students in your high schools. I'm going to introduce them by name. We're going to pass over the mics, and then I've asked them to introduce themselves because they know themselves better than I do, but I've been so impressed with meeting them so far. So we have 2 speakers. One of them is Auspicia Carlson, who comes from Oklahoma and has a vast history of experience in public education. And our other presenter is Angie Lundgren, who comes from the Equal Opportunity Schools organization in Seattle. Equal Opportunity Schools is working with some high schools in Granite School District, and we've been really impressed with their efforts to work with students in high schools. So that's on. Do you have the other one?
I do, yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sid. Good morning, everyone. And I want to thank, first of all, Sid, Holly, the State Board of Regents, the system of higher education here in Utah, and just let you know that it is our pleasure to be here today to talk to you about the work that we are doing really throughout the country to support our students and help them to succeed at higher levels. I also just want to say that I am also originally from Seattle, and I was an intern for Ansel Adams when I was in high school. So just a little side note about me, since that seems to be of interest this morning. So my name is Auspicia Carlson, and I am originally from Seattle. I had the opportunity to work in Title I urban schools for the last 19 years as an educator and also as a principal in Dallas ISD, Oklahoma City Public Schools, and Tulsa Public Schools. In 2017, I was named Principal of the Year for the state of Oklahoma and got to go to Washington, D.C. and represent all of our fantastic educators. One thing that I can say is that we are working hard to close the gap between how we're preparing students for life after high school, whether it's college, career, or the military, and we are not yet where Utah is at. So I really commend you. Over 36,000 students taking concurrent enrollment courses is absolutely fantastic. What I do have experience in is as an adjunct instructor at Oklahoma City Community College, also as an AP trainer of teachers, a certified associate for professional learning communities, and I mentor principals around the country, especially in turnaround and transformation schools. So one of the things that we really struggle with is helping get those young people to that level of rigor, specifically our minority students and our students from low-income backgrounds. So my colleague, Angie, has experience as the manager of strategic initiatives for Equal Opportunity Schools, and she's going to talk to you a little bit about their work and what they are doing to support students in Granite.
Thank you. Passing the baton. Good morning. Thank you for having us. It's really great to be back in Salt Lake City. I've had the opportunity to come down a couple of times in the last year to meet with school districts in the area, including our partners in Granite. We're working with 4 of the high schools there. this is a test. Cottonwood, Hunter, Granger, and not Kearns. I know it's not Kearns. We've got Hunter, we've got Cottonwood, we've got Granger. Cypress. Thank you. Okay, so I failed that test. You can all let them know that I failed. So I work for Equal Opportunity Schools. I come to Equal Opportunity Schools from a math teaching background. I taught high school mathematics, everything from extreme remediation, where we were still working on rounding to the nearest 10th as juniors in high school, through advanced placement statistics. I had the opportunity to teach AP statistics in a very diverse school district outside of Seattle. And then I came to Equal Opportunity Schools 3 years ago as part of our partnership department. So you'll hear EOS talk about our partner districts. I initially worked with about 65 schools across the country, including supporting the partnership director who worked with Oklahoma City at the time. And then I moved over to strategic initiatives. So most of my time is spent talking with prospective partners for EOS. But what we do as an organization, we really believe in the potential of students, and we believe that access precedes opportunity. And that too many of our students simply don't see themselves as having opportunities, and that educators are often the gatekeepers, intentionally or not, mostly not, of that opportunity. And so we partner with high schools to really elevate student voice, and to look at students in a more holistic manner. We'll see some of the tools that we use throughout this presentation, but we have worked with Carol Dweck, who's the author of Mindset. Many of the high schools will be familiar with that from doing professional learning community work on that. And we work with her team at PERTS on both growth mindset and sense of belonging. We've worked some with Claude Steele, who wrote Whistling Vivaldi, looking at stereotype threat and the experiences that students who have never challenged themselves before experience when they are sitting in an AP course, an International Baccalaureate course, or particularly a dual enrollment course like you have here in Utah. And I do want to say that you've got some materials from us that talk a lot about AP and IB, because as an organization, that's where we started. Those are the only nationally benchmarked programs that we worked with. But we heard loud and clear, especially from Utah, because you guys have an incredibly robust system, that we have to start looking at more explorations of rigor, that it's not just AP and IB. And so I'm really excited about the opportunity to partner both with Granite, we're hoping to work with them another year, and also other schools in Utah, and to share the things we've learned. We've surveyed a little over 1.1 million students over the course of 10 years. We have a lot of data on student belonging, on growth mindset, on grit, and many other kind of non-traditional ways to look at how students are preparing for life after college or after high school. And I'm really excited for the opportunities to learn more about how we can use our tools to help folks with concurrent enrollment, and for concurrent enrollment folks to learn about the tools that we've developed and how they can be applied. It was really long, sorry.
Thank you, Angie. So this is a little bit of a mission statement from Equal Opportunity Schools, which also aligns with my purpose in life and as an educator, which is really to tap into the potential of our young people. So today we're going to be talking about those ways that we can support young people, whether it's concurrent enrollment, AP, or IB, so that they can be successful in programs where they may traditionally not have felt like they had a place. Our learning objectives for today, we're going to be stretching our comfort zone a little bit, because who we are as leaders matters, and we take this with us every single day. It is part of how we relate with others, and it's a very important part of creating those relationships that can help support educators and students to be successful. Who our students, staff, and families are matters, and the better that we know our communities, the better that we are in tune with their needs, the better that we are able to support them for success. Students really value a sense of belonging and inclusiveness. So through my work as a principal and now director of high school design in Tulsa Public Schools, I've had the opportunity to do a lot of engagement with local businesses, with parents, nonprofit leaders, teachers, and students. And by far, one of the things that motivates them the most is the relationship that they have with educators. So we see this as something that really can be transferable from AP and IB to concurrent enrollment to help our young people be successful. And there are strategies that we can use that can help us foster this sense of belonging for all of our students, to help them really challenge themselves in more rigorous coursework, to opt in to more rigorous coursework, and to really see themselves as being part of a community where this is becoming more and more the norm, especially for Utah. I'm not going to read this quote to you, but Dr. Linda Darling-Hammond from the Learning Policy Institute has done a lot of work in the science of learning. And there is ample research to show us that a sense of belonging and inclusiveness is motivating, especially for minority students and those students coming from backgrounds of poverty or generational poverty and trauma. In my work, I've also done some work with the National Equity Project, and one of the things that we really talk about is connecting with others through the lens of empathy. Really listening to the stories of our students and families, knowing who they are so that we can better engage with them and support our students. So I'm going to ask you now to indulge me in a little activity where you're going to be getting up out of your seat. We're going to do a compass activity, and the middle here is Salt Lake City. So if you are originally from Salt Lake City, please stand here. If you are from north, think of this as like a giant map of the United States. North is this way. So if you are north of Salt Lake City, you're going to be here. South is in this direction. East and west. So if you could indulge me just for a few minutes. I know this is a very K-12 type of activity. So today we're going to be talking a little bit about identity and the impact of identity on our students, on their perceptions, on their feeling of belonging, and how we can use student identity to better engage our young people. So I'm going to share with you this video called The Danger of a Single Story. Some of you may have seen it. This resonated with me over the last 10 years because my parents are both first-generation immigrants, and they are both from Greece. And the whole time when I was growing up, we were what we and my friends called super Greeks. Meaning that, you know, we had to get statues that looked like all of the statues in Greece at the Acropolis and the Parthenon, and these were kind of the decorations in our home. So when we went to Greek school, which we did, just like my big fat Greek wedding, we all kind of made fun of the fact that we were super Greeks. Over the last 10 years, though, I feel like the narrative has kind of changed. So that when I talk about being Greek, a lot of times the response I get is, it's so beautiful, the islands are beautiful, but it's like such a shame about the economy and how they can't pay their debts. And I feel like, you know, a sense of shame because they're not good at managing their money. They being the country of Greece, being my heritage, my relatives. So as that narrative kind of changed, I noticed after seeing this video that I started to kind of internalize some of those things that were being felt about the country based on their economic situation, and how my perception about myself and my heritage actually was influenced by this. So what I would like to challenge us with today is to start to look through a lens of what kinds of things inform the identity of our students, especially our minority and low-income students? And how are these actually barriers to student achievement? So we are not here to talk about maybe specific situations of students, but just to become more aware and open to the idea that there are barriers that we may not see at first. There are barriers to students' perceptions about what they can achieve. When I was in 3rd grade, I found out by accident that my aunt was illiterate. And I saw her sign a piece of paper with an X. And I sensed a feeling of shame from my father. It was his sister. When I asked him why she was signing her name with an X. And I knew, I think I knew starting at that moment, but definitely between 3rd and 6th grade, I knew I wanted to be an educator. And that moment was one that really shaped that desire and passion for me. Because I felt that sense of like, this is not good. This is a bad thing, and we should feel badly about the fact that a grown person is illiterate. And so when we have students who come from backgrounds where they may have gaps in education, I know that in Texas and in Oklahoma, we have students who come from different countries in South America and Latin America, and they may have been out of school for a couple of years. And so rather than, facing that with kind of the deficit mindset, looking at that with how can we empathize and support these students to help them overcome these kinds of stigmas and barriers to what they can achieve. The Turnaround for Children, which is a nonprofit in Washington, D.C., has done a lot of research on how relationships can actually help students not only make up for one lost year of education, but sometimes 2 in a single year. And that is part of their research in Washington, D.C. that I've just really started to delve into. But it all comes back to this sense of belonging and relationships. So if you will, just indulge me in this video from Chimamanda Adichie.
I'm a storyteller, and I would like to tell you a few personal stories about what I like to call the danger of the single story. I grew up on a university campus in eastern Nigeria. My mother says that I started reading at the age of 2, although I think 4 is probably close to the truth. So I was an early reader, and what I read were British and American children's books. I was also an early writer. And when I began to write at about the age of 7, stories in pencil with crayon illustrations that my poor mother was obligated to read, I wrote exactly the kinds of stories I was reading. All my characters were white and blue-eyed. They played in the snow, they ate apples, and they talked a lot about the weather, how lovely it was that the sun had come out. Now this despite the fact that I lived in Nigeria. I had never been outside Nigeria. We didn't have snow, we ate mangoes, and we never talked about the weather because there was no need to. My characters also drank a lot of ginger beer because the characters in the British books I read drank ginger beer. Never mind that I had no idea what ginger beer was. And for many years afterwards, I would have a desperate desire to taste ginger beer. But that is another story. What this demonstrates, I think, is how impressionable and vulnerable we are in the face of a story, particularly as children. Because all I had read were books in which characters were foreign, I had become convinced that books, by their very nature, had to have foreigners in them, and had to be about things with which I could not personally identify. Now, things changed when I discovered African books. There weren't many of them available, and they weren't quite as easy to find as the foreign books. But because of writers like Chinua Achebe and Kamara Lai, I went through a mental shift in my perception of literature. I realized that people like me, girls with skin the color of chocolate, whose kinky hair could not form ponytails, could also exist in literature. I started to write about things I recognized. Now, I loved those American and British books I read. They stirred my imagination, they opened up new worlds for me. But the unintended consequence was that I did not know that people like me could exist in literature. So what the discovery of African writers did for me was this. It saved me from having a single story of what books are. I come from a conventional middle-class Nigerian family. My father was a professor. My mother was an administrator. And so we had, as was the norm, living domestic help who would often come from nearby rural villages. So the year I turned 8, we got a new houseboy. His name was Fide. The only thing my mother told us about him was that his family was very poor. My mother sent yams and rice and our old clothes to his family. And when I didn't finish my dinner, my mother would say, "Finish your food. Don't you know people like Fide's family have nothing?" So I felt enormous pity for Fide's family. Then one Saturday, we went to his village to visit. And his mother showed us a beautifully patterned basket made of dyed raffia that his brother had made. I was startled. It had not occurred to me that anybody in his family could actually make something. All I had heard about them was how poor they were, so that it had become impossible for me to see them as anything else but poor. Their poverty was my single story of them. Years later, I thought about this when I left Nigeria to go to university in the United States. I was 19. My American roommate was shocked by me. She asked where I had learned to speak English so well, and was confused when I said that Nigeria happened to have English as its official language. She asked if she could listen to what she called my tribal music. I was consequently very disappointed when I produced my tape of Mariah Carey. She assumed that I did not know how to use a stove. What struck me was this: she had felt sorry for me even before she saw me. Her default position toward me as an African was a kind of patronizing, well-meaning pity. My roommate had a single story of Africa, a single story of catastrophe. In this single story, there was no possibility of Africans being similar to her in any way, no possibility of feelings more complex than pity, no possibility of a connection as human equals. I will say that before I went to the US, I didn't consciously identify as African. But in the US, whenever Africa came up, people turned to me, never mind that I knew nothing about places like Namibia. But I did come to embrace this new identity, and in many ways I think of myself now as African, although I still get quite irritable when Africa is referred to as a country, the most recent example being my otherwise wonderful flight from Lagos 2 days ago, in which there was an announcement on the Virgin flight about their charity walk in India, Africa, and other countries. So after I had spent some years in the US as an African, I began to understand my roommate's response to me. If I had not grown up in Nigeria, and if all I knew about Africa were from popular images, I too would think that Africa was a place of beautiful landscapes, beautiful animals, and incomprehensible people fighting senseless wars, dying of poverty and AIDS, unable to speak for themselves, and waiting to be saved by a kind, white foreigner. I would see Africans in the same way that I, as a child, had seen Fide's family. This single story of Africa ultimately comes, I think, from Western literature. Now here's a quote from the writing of a London merchant called John Locke, who sailed to West Africa in 1561 and kept a fascinating account of his voyage. After referring to the black Africans as beasts who have no houses, he writes, "They are also people without heads, having their mouths and eyes in their breasts." Now, I've laughed every time I've read this, and one must admire the imagination of John Locke. But what is important about his writing is that it represents the beginning of a tradition of telling African stories in the West. A tradition of sub-Saharan Africa as a place of negatives, of difference, of darkness, of people who, in the words of the wonderful poet Rudyard Kipling, are half devil, half child. And so I began to realize that my American roommate must have, throughout her life, seen and heard different versions of this single story. As had a professor who once told me that my novel was not authentically African. Now, I was quite willing to contend that there were a number of things wrong with the novel, that it had failed in a number of cases, but I had not quite imagined that it had failed at achieving something called African authenticity. In fact, I did not know what African authenticity was. The professor told me that my characters were too much like him, an educated and middle-class man. My characters drove cars. They were not starving. Therefore, they were not authentically African. But I must quickly add that I too am just as guilty on the question of a single story. A few years ago, I visited Mexico from the US. The political climate in the US at the time was tense, and there were debates going on about immigration. And, as often happens in America, immigration became synonymous with Mexicans. There were endless stories of Mexicans as people who were fleecing the healthcare system, sneaking across the border, being arrested at the border, that sort of thing. I remember walking around on my first day in Guadalajara, watching the people going to work, rolling up tortillas in the marketplace, smoking, laughing. I remember first feeling slight surprise, and then I was overwhelmed with shame. I realized that I had been so immersed in the media coverage of Mexicans that they had become one thing in my mind, the abject immigrant. I had bought into the single story of Mexicans, and I could not have been more ashamed of myself. So that is how to create a single story. Show a people as one thing, as only one thing, over and over again, and that is what they become.
Turn and talk at your tables about what resonates with you from this video. What can you relate with from the things that Ms. Adichie said, or what do you not relate with from this video? What was surprising? What was an aha moment?
I forget how much I like that video in between viewings. I feel like I maybe just need to listen to it on my drive to work every day.
Especially, I mean, in Oklahoma, obviously very red state. I am always like bracing myself when I'm actually watching it, watching people's faces. Because one day, like, they're just out there all going to get up and walk out.
Right.
Like, I'm just going to piss them off.
Yeah.
But I do feel like if you watch it till the end, when she talks about her own biases,
Yeah.
you're like, yeah, we can all relate to that.
Right. Yeah, we all have.
And that's always my hope in showing it, just to get people to kind of let their guard down that, like, we have our common humanity in common, and it's not about blame. So hopefully that comes across. I also felt like sometimes I have to preface it with my own kind of story to get people to be like, oh, okay, I see what you mean.
Yeah. And I sometimes think about, when I'm watching it, I also think about how Equal Opportunity Schools does our GAPS checks and how we do, and we do it for a lot of reasons. We can't have a single point for every student for a whole lot of reasons, including student privacy, but but it is this tension between how we bucket students and then how we pull them apart.
Right.
So I have this tension of like, think about all the different stories and then like also group these kids together.
Yeah.
Close these gaps.
Right.
So it's kind of an interesting, be self-reflective.
I don't know how I'm doing on time, but I think the data points will not be quite as long. So we have 40 minutes. Okay, good.
I feel like I need a watch.
I know.
But my grandmother gave me a watch.
box for college graduation, and it's broken, and I refuse to replace it with anything else.
Are you going to get it
We
fixed?
need-
Are there
it's
watch
been
fixers anymore?
It's just been difficult to get. I've sent it back to the company that made it, and they weren't able to fix it, and now every once in a while my husband says, you know what, I just should fix your watch for you for, X, Y, or Z. And I'm like, yes, do that, please. Because I want to wear it again.
Yeah.
It's actually really hard to read, too. Because, of course, what did I want when I was
Right. No numbers.
Yeah. It's like Roman numerals, and it's like tiny and square, but I just can't bring myself to wear something else. So I don't know how well it would help me keep time.
About 1 minute to wrap up your conversation.
And there's no clock in this room.
I have a pretty good sense of like,
Yeah,
but,
rhythm and time.
and Sid said, like, if it's 12:05 or 11:55, it's not a big deal.
Okay, let's come back to the larger group. I love hearing the conversations about ways that people connect to that video and how it kind of brings us back to our common humanity. And when Ms. Adichie says about her own biases when she goes to Guadalajara, it really resonates with me because I feel like we all, to a certain extent, are very vulnerable to what we see in the media and to the stories that are predominant in our own communities that we hear about people. I recently had the opportunity to work with families in Tulsa Public Schools and discovered that although we offer translation for Spanish for our Hispanic families, we have like 30 other languages that are spoken in Tulsa Public Schools. And that can be very isolating for people because we don't have the resources, quite frankly, to be able to address all of their needs. And so consequently, they are oftentimes left feeling like they are not a part of the conversation. Trying to bring them in, trying to find resources to help them be a part of the process is something that is a continual struggle for us. So how does understanding, or how does the shift in mindset to really trying to connect with all of our different students, their families, our communities, how does this really promote equity? I think that is really the first step when we start talking about equity work, whether it is looking at certain racial groups or ethnic groups, students coming from backgrounds of poverty. There can be many different lenses through which we view equity work. Sometimes the thoughts and feelings that are provoked by, having these conversations can sometimes be uncomfortable. But at equal opportunity schools and in my work around the country, what we do talk about is the fact that sometimes we, as educators, are the ones that kind of carry that torch for change when it comes to what the future is going to hold for our young people. So looking at our equity timeline, there is a lot that has happened just recently. If you look going back to 1619, and then to today's event to discuss inclusion of students in concurrent enrollment, what all has happened in between? Most of our equity work has really happened in the last 55 years. But schools themselves, for the most part across the nation, have not changed a lot in the last 100 years. In 1779, Thomas Jefferson proposed this two-track educational system. And this is, I think, what we really are trying to do through equity work, is take away this notion that certain students are destined for a certain path forward and really look at the potential of students in areas that they are passionate about. In my work in high school design, we have really tried to close the gap between what industry is looking for with our young people and how we're preparing them for the world of work. Also, what our colleges and universities are looking for with our young people, what types of competencies and skills, and how we are preparing them for life after high school. Through AP, through concurrent enrollment, through IB, I think we really start to overlap those two areas so that we are really preparing students much better while they are in high school, while we are able to facilitate those relationships that really can support them and one-on-one type of connections. So one of our essential questions today is, what would be achieved if a student's success and well-being were no longer predictable by any social, cultural, or economic factor? And research shows us today that the economic factor is one that is really starting to weigh very heavily on the predictive outcomes of our students. It is this opportunity for more rigorous, challenging coursework in high school that really helps our students be prepared not only to be in college, but also to graduate. You would be astonished by the discrepancy in the types of courses that are offered around the country for young people. The schools that don't even offer Algebra 2, the schools that don't offer advanced placement classes. When I got to Oklahoma City Public Schools, my high school had 1 advanced placement class. The school down the street had 20. Those students did not even have the opportunity to be in those courses in their school because they just were not offered. When I left my high school last year, after working with equal opportunity schools for 3 years, we had 13 advanced placement classes, and more than 50% of the high school students were enrolled in advanced placement courses. I have a lot of communication still with those students today, and they really are very vocal about the fact that their success is partially due to the rigor in those advanced placement courses. One of the things I started to do my last few years, the last 2 years that I was a high school principal, was to have a round table, and I invited students back to talk to our department chairs about what we did to prepare them well and what we did not do to prepare them well. So inviting college freshmen and sophomores back to the high school to have a discussion really helped inform our practices at the high school level about the preparation that we were giving them to be successful in college. So today, what we're looking at for our opportunity gap is mostly based on income. It is really a contextual issue. When I was a teacher in Dallas ISD, 80% of my students were English language learners. When I went to Oklahoma City and I became a principal, more than 80% of my students were African American. Very different needs, very different context, both Title I, but definitely a different way of approaching leadership, instruction, and support for them to be successful. A lot of that really had to do with just getting to know them and cultural norms and how to best support them. Very, very different types of environments. So today we're going to be looking at, and you have in your folders, some of the data on this one-pager from the State Board of Education and the System of Higher Education that shows the breakdown from 2018 of your students who are in concurrent enrollment, and I absolutely commend you. This is fantastic work, and I will say that Utah is definitely blazing a trail for many other states. But where is our opportunity gap? Our opportunity gap really lies with engaging those students from low-income backgrounds. And I've included in here another educational equity timeline that shows here when the Utah legislature established the concurrent enrollment program in 1988, and to look at those numbers that you have from 1988 until now is absolutely amazing. A lot of work being done in very recent history. Concurrent enrollment. What does your data say? What is the data that is being shared with you? The 2018 high school graduating class, 53% of students had taken at least one concurrent enrollment course. And by taking concurrent enrollment, it is estimated that students saved over $48 million in tuition. In that same graduating class, college-going rate for low-income students who participated in concurrent enrollment was more than twice that of low-income students who did not participate. So that participation is essential for students to be successful. And 74% of those credits were in highly transferable gen ed courses. You guys are going to be going a little bit deeper into this, and I know that Sid has also prepared the white paper that is available for you, as well as this one-pager.
In case you don't know, we do get a white paper, and you should read it. I mean, I think I'm sometimes the only one that reads it. It's about 15 pages long, but it provides narrative and goes into great depth. You'll see it on UWCE.org. You'll find it there.
And the data that's included in today's presentation is from the white paper, so that will kind of help inform your interest in going and looking at that larger document. So what about today? Think about, do our schools reduce or reproduce some inequalities, and what experiences in your community do you need to learn more about? So take a moment with your neighbor and just discuss these two questions. Where do you see inequalities in our current system? And what experiences in your community do you possibly need to learn more about in order to help address those? So I'm going to go to right there. Yeah. Yeah, there. I think so.
Understanding most of them, was I making them better students or worse students?
So when we were doing that Find Your People activity, like everybody was up and talking, and then there was like one lady that was sitting all by herself over here at her seat, and I was like, that seems so odd to me. To literally be like the only one person in the room, just not
The only thing I can
participating.
think of is like an accessibility issue of like maybe standing is hard or moving around is hard for some reason. But yeah,
Well, then she got up and left. I think she may have just been like, maybe had an appointment or something and had to leave. I don't know. I don't want to assume. It was just like striking to me because obviously if you're the only person not participating. Okay, let's wrap up our final thought and come back to the group. So our next series of slides is really taking a deeper dive into the data that came out of the higher education report on your concurrent enrollment numbers. So we are going to go through these slides and you will have opportunities to talk about what those slides say to you and to have those discussions at your tables. So as we work through them, I'm going to pause at each slide so that you have an opportunity to discuss. So I want to start with this again, that we have much to celebrate in Utah's very strong push for concurrent enrollment and the numbers that you have there before you. Really setting the stage for many other states to look at your example of how you are offering concurrent enrollment to young people in high school. So I just definitely want to commend you for that work and let you know that it is a difference maker in the lives of young people. Looking at this graph here, participation history from 2007 to 2018. And this data is included in the white paper, but we have pulled some of the main graphs for you to look at here today and discuss. Quite phenomenal. Here again showing the increase for juniors and seniors in concurrent enrollment from 2009 through 18.
It's their enrollment brought in that initiative. Yes. But you know, the math increase is only 25%. Yeah.
We know that concurrent enrollment math specifically can be very challenging, both math and science often, especially in some of our urban districts. Those are courses where students, especially minority students and those from low-income backgrounds, are not quite as successful. This graph shows attempted credits and earned credits for concurrent enrollment math.
I'm not kidding. That was a heavy
And this is from 2011 through 18. So a huge increase over the last basically 3 to 4 years from 2015-16. I know the graphs on the handouts are quite small, some of them, so just know that all of those are included on the website that Sid mentioned. And moving on, who is taking concurrent enrollment classes? Here's a breakdown of our student demographics by race and ethnicity, and the net change.
And the far right is the USP population. 84%. And the far right is the population of USPE total, and then the middle column is the concurrent program.
Yeah, these two here are the concurrent program, and then you can compare them to the proportion of students across the state. This is something we see a lot in the work that, I guess I should take the, I'm not my father with the booming voice. This is really quite similar to the state of a lot of districts and states across the country where our white students, and often, I'm not tall enough, but often our Asian students are the students who are traditionally taking advantage of concurrent enrollment, AP, IB, those rigorous programs, at a disproportionate rate to what they are in the general population. So you have 75-ish% of the general population being white, but somewhere in the 84% are actually taking advantage of the program, versus 17% of the demographics being Hispanic, and only about 9.7% taking advantage of the program. And so that's really something that's at the heart of the work that Equal Opportunity Schools does, is the identification of students in those groups that are underrepresented for how they appear in your communities, and how can we help identify students who have the potential to be successful and may not realize that they have that opportunity or have been encouraged to take advantage of that opportunity. So that's really the opportunity and the gap that we're talking about. Thanks.
Thank you, Angie. One of the things that I found in a high school with a majority of minority students was that, the dialogue around concurrent enrollment and AP was, these are harder classes. These are the classes that the smarter kids are taking. And a lot of it was just because there was not a lot of knowledge with their parent or guardian. And so once we really started to invite those parents and guardians in to teach them about the benefits of AP, concurrent enrollment, and IB, that was when we started to see parents really pushing their kids in. We were very surprised at the number of parents that didn't know that their children could get free college credit through advanced placement courses if they passed the exams. It was something that definitely took a lot of outreach, and the same is often true of our parents that are working multiple, minimum wage jobs or single parent homes. They often don't have the knowledge to really support and push their children to go into those programs. This table shows the number of courses that most of the students are taking from 1 to 12 or more classes.
This is by classes, not by credits, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. 26 kids.
this in 1 year, or is this over their concurrent enrollment?
This is for the 17-18 year. I think that in other paragraphs in the white paper, it'll say that something like 84% of the students take between 1 and 6 classes in their experience of concurrent enrollment.
Okay.
Because farmer kids take senior year, maybe they take 1 as a junior, and they'll take 3 or 4 as a senior. But 6 is a magic number for the great majority of our students. One class. That's okay.
So where is the opportunity gap that we are looking at today? We know that 50% of low-income students, based on free and reduced lunch, who take one concurrent enrollment class are enrolled in college the fall after graduation, compared to just 23% of those low-income students who do not take a concurrent enrollment class. So we see this really as the opportunity gap for where we can engage young people to increase their chance of success. So through the work with Equal Opportunity Schools, this is really where we work on making connections with young people, increasing a sense of belonging to help them be successful. And the adults in the buildings matter. How they perceive young people, the expectations that they have for them are absolutely essential to the success of our young people. I'll let Angie talk a little bit more about this.
Oh, I didn't have anything on this one.
Oh, sorry about that.
We shifted slide order.
So what about brain science? I talked a little bit about brain science from Turnaround for Children. And this is a quote from Dr. Cantor about filling the gaps for young people who are coming in with foundational gaps in their knowledge and may be behind 1 or more years. So the danger of a single story is important because the way we label students can hinder their progress or willingness to take on challenging coursework. And in our work with young people in majority schools, or coming out of homes where they may have one single parent or guardian, or being raised by grandparents, aunts, and uncles, it is really one person that they cite as being their encourager or mentor to really support them in taking on challenging coursework. So this danger of a single story can really take on many forms of the stories that we have about the people in our classrooms today. And here is Angie's part.
Oh, thank you. All right. Am I on? I'm on. So Equal Opportunity Schools works with partners. In the first year, we do a really intensive survey process in the fall, where we ask schools to survey 90% of their students and staff in order to get a really deep look at the climate and experience that students are having. And it's one of the ways that we help identify students who might be flying under the radar. This is kind of that invisible middle that's floating along. They're not, 3 years behind in grade level, but they're not your high achiever who's taking 12 in concurrent enrollment courses. That blew my mind. I had to remind myself not everybody's on a semester system. But they're just kind of going along, and maybe no one's telling them they should work a little harder or try something different or thinking about what their aspirations are after. Partners who work with us another year have the opportunity to re-engage with students after they've been in a classroom for a year and ask some questions about what was your experience. And so I know this is really hard to read. You have a copy of it in your notes too, which is probably even harder to read without a magnifying glass. But these are some of the things that students have said. The light green are first-time students. They've never taken an advanced course of this nature before. And when we talk about underrepresented students, we're talking about low-income students and students of color for the purposes of our work. And then the blue is our experienced students. So you can see for most of these questions, specifically kind of thinking about, I feel like a part of a community in class, it's about half. How does the other half feel sitting in that classroom? What is the experience for them? They don't feel a sense of community is my assumption. I feel comfortable asking for help. We get almost to 2/3. We're 62, 64%. But again, what's the experience for the other 38, 36%? They don't feel comfortable asking for help, and why not? I generally feel comfortable asking for help in my job, right? I can go to one of my colleagues and say, I am banging my head against the wall on this problem, or I can't figure out how to, make this chart work, or get the clicker to work, or whatever or I need help with the language for this draft of something or other. But who helps us develop that ability to ask questions and ask for help? Often it's our experiences in education. So some of these are statements that we utilize to help our schools re-examine what's happening in the classroom in order to hopefully have those numbers go up the next time they ask these questions. It's still lower than I'd love, but I do love that the higher numbers are my AP and IB teachers believe that I'm capable of succeeding in class. I wish it were even higher, but at least those are our high notes on this particular set of data. And this is from last year, because we haven't given this survey to our schools this year yet, since most of them are still kind of in the middle of the school year. So this is from 17-18, and it covered, about 85 schools across the country were giving this exam, and I think it was on the order of about 40,000 students who were asked questions. This is a quote from a student about their experience. One of the things we ask students to do is write a letter to someone like them. We don't give them many more parameters than that, but write a letter to a student like you who might be considering taking a class or not. What words of encouragement might you have? often, for those of you in K-12, this is what you see in your student information system about a student. Right? You see their GPA, you see their current grade, you might see some test scores. Those are frequently the prerequisites we use for getting into an honors class or an AP class. I believe there is no GPA requirement for concurrent enrollment, but I could be wrong. There is, okay. And so this is our starting point. The fall survey allows equal opportunity schools to help fill in some gaps so that students have the opportunity to get or teachers have the opportunity to get to know their students a little bit better. We provide, when we can, we provide their picture. It starts to become a little bit like a baseball stats card. Collect the whole class. But having their face really starts to humanize the students. We start to see, for this particular student, her educational goals. I can tell you that of the over 400,000 students we surveyed last year, about 88% of them said they wanted to go to college of some form. Nationally, we find that 4 to 6 year completion rates are about 31%. So it's a huge discrepancy between their aspirations and what they're able to achieve. We can see her career interests. Where does she want to go after high school? She really wants to be a teacher, which is always gratifying as a teacher to see someone else who wants to go into education. Trusted adults is a huge, huge piece of the work that we do. And study skills, identifying the folks who've helped them with study skills. Looks like we have a font issue here. Those 3 little boxes should be little apples, or maybe thumbs up, depending on the version you have. We ask staff as a part of their survey process to identify students that they think are not currently taking advantage of more rigorous coursework who could be successful. We also start to see some subject interest, right? Maybe not everybody needs to take every type of concurrent class out there, but how about getting them involved in something they're passionate about that might really help them explore even deeper when they get to college because they've got some of that beginning work out of the way. And then we bring in some assets and barriers. You have a sample student insight card in the folder that we provided, and in the back there's a full list of all of the assets and barriers that our surveys identify. This is a snippet because this is one particular example student, and we didn't feel like we should give her every asset and every barrier. That's not quite accurate. Feels classes are not adequate preparation for college. Colleges or courses are not challenging. We see that a lot for students who aren't necessarily doing exceptionally well with their GPA, but are just kind of doing the minimum to get by. What would happen if we engaged them in something that they were more passionate about and excited about? What if we asked them to think a little bit harder, thinking about that cycle of high expectations and rigorous coursework leading to greater outcomes? There's often a huge information barrier, both with parents and families, but also with students who just aren't quite sure why to take something and what would be the advantage. And on the flip side, we have some really great things to look at. She'd consider taking AP, might want to know more about it, doesn't know enough about them. And she's got some demonstrated assets, including community leadership. We really like to identify things that students are doing outside of school that can indicate a sense of responsibility and focus and time management ability, as well as she indicated academic strategies that she felt that she was successful with. And just to clarify, we don't ask students if they have grit, right? We ask a whole bunch of other questions that then relate to scores around academic strategies, et cetera, where we know that 13 to 18-year-olds are not necessarily going to have the self-awareness to be able to answer those types of questions. I'm not sure 21 to 65-year-olds have the self-awareness. So the survey has been developed by researchers to ask those questions in more holistic ways. But these student insight cards also include information from the students. So they have the opportunity to just do some free response and share some information that they would like their schools to know. And I think this is one of the really amazing things, to watch teachers read these comments and learn a little bit more. I recently did a trusted adult training in Oregon with a group of teachers who had been identified by students as trusted adults. So that was the first like happy pat on the back, right? Like all of these students said they trusted me. How awesome is that? And then they started reading through the cards, and one of the teachers immediately stood up and like went over to the principal and was like, she says she doesn't have a computer at home. I don't understand how she's doing so well in my class. What can we do about this? He had no idea. She trusted him, but hadn't felt comfortable enough to share that she was getting through her junior year of high school with no computer, no internet access at home. I don't know how she was writing her papers. And that was a really powerful moment for the principal to be like, well, we've got Chromebooks in the library. And the teacher's like, we do? And then it goes, along the line. So we were able to get that student what she needed to hopefully have an even more successful time moving forward. So these are really powerful tools to learn about students and to help foster a sense of belonging, and also really learn how to engage them into courses that would be really beneficial for them.
So in my experience as a principal and working with schools that have high concentrations of low-income students and minority students, we have identified strategies to enroll and support young people in concurrent enrollment, AP, and IB. So I want to share some of those with you today. It starts really with counselors and trusted educators using these insight cards and having one-on-one conferences. And in schools that don't have the opportunity to use insight cards, that trusted adult can be someone in the school who offers support and encouragement for young people to enroll in the more rigorous classes. Parent Information Night. This one I have found to be very critical because most of our parents, quite frankly, just didn't know about what the courses offered for them. And unfortunately, sometimes our students who are getting most of the benefit from AP and concurrent enrollment and earning those credits in high school are some that need that the least financially. I love having former students come and talk to the young people. They are the best salesmen. They can convince our sophomores, juniors, and seniors much more readily than any adult can. So when I have students come back and talk about their freshman year in college and how AP Language and Composition or AP Literature and Composition or their concurrent enrollment class was essential to their writing skills as a freshman in college, you better believe that they are much better at selling that program than any adult is. So I would say definitely get young people to come back and give back in just that way. Peer study groups. This was essential in our school, being a Title I school. We really relied on some of our stronger students to mentor and work with our students who were struggling a little bit to help them be successful. We held peer study groups after school and also on Saturdays in order to support the young people who were in concurrent enrollment and our AP classes. We also had Saturday study sessions and online Blackboard. So I do know, and I'm going to share with you some of the statistics from the classes that are actually being taught by high school adjunct instructors, which is the majority here. But for those who are being taught at the college level, and that small percentage of students who are taking the virtual online classes, you can build community, although not in quite the same way as face-to-face, but you can do that through, offering an opportunity for students to share some things about themselves in a Blackboard type platform, of course, what they're comfortable with, but just to get to know them a little bit as young people. In the high school setting, definitely asking for student input on classroom norms, having students work together to come up with what they would like their classroom to offer them in terms of support so that they can be successful in these more rigorous courses. Providing lots of opportunities for our first-time AP, concurrent enrollment, and IB students to have connection with their teachers. So that can be an advisory time. It can be an identification of students who need extra support and just having teachers give an extra 15 minutes a week to be checking in with those young people to see how they're doing, to see if they need extra support in any areas. Checking in often is really key with our low-income students. Things can often change for them on a day-to-day basis in their home environment. So checking in often is very critical before they kind of feel overwhelmed. So the delivery of instruction, 2017-18, 85% of those concurrent enrollment credits were taught by adjunct high school teachers. So this is very significant because of the fact that this allows those teachers in high school to make those connections and strengthen relationships to support those students that are needing the extra support, and namely minority and low-income students. So this is definitely someplace where we can strengthen our practices as educators and employ some of the strategies that we know to be effective in increasing that connectedness and feeling of belonging. And here is a table. Again, this is from the white paper. You can find this information about the delivery method of those earned concurrent enrollment credits. I think this really lends itself to that opportunity to really strengthen the supports that we're providing for our students. Seeing that the percentage taught by high school teachers at the high school is nearly 80%. So turn and talk just with your elbow partner. What are the implications of that data? So we're hearing some great conversation about how to engage our young people, especially those from low-income homes, and how we can support them to be courageous and enroll in concurrent enrollment and maybe take more than one class. We've included a couple of quotes from the EOS survey data that really just talk about the personal struggles that young people face sometimes that are barriers to their success, or just barriers in mindset to understanding what potential is offered for them through concurrent enrollment, AP, or IB. We're going to move through this little activity just in the interest of time. We know lunch is looming. Angie's going to share a little bit more from the data that's collected from Equal Opportunity Schools.
Thank you. Hopefully you're able to read this. I know it printed very small in the notes. But one of the things we really think is important is elevating student voice. I think we, as educators, can often sit in a room and decide what we're going to offer after school, or teachers have specific, requirements in their syllabus and they think about how they would want to be supported. But having the opportunity to ask students what would be helpful for them can be really powerful in reallocating resources and thinking about how to ensure that students have a more successful experience. So this is an example from one report that these were support resources that were available. So just kind of getting a sense of what students know about, which can be, again, an infinite information barrier, right? What do they not even realize is available to them? And again, because our surveys are really geared towards AP and IB, I think these overly focus on kind of that exam preparation in a way that concurrent enrollment students aren't necessarily looking for the same, right? They don't have that May 2-week block that they're targeting. However, depending on the course, sometimes your exams are most of your grade. So maybe exam and test preparation would be really valuable. Teacher office hours and the opportunities to redo assignments are also generally really high. Students really value the opportunity to learn what they did wrong and have the opportunity to do it better next time. And that, I think, has been a real shift for a lot of instructors. I think back to my high school math teaching days and the debates we had around whether it was okay to retake a test and how that test grade was affected, et cetera. But really, in the service of students, redoing an assignment and learning from mistakes is a lot more powerful. Students, understanding why students are not using the supports that are available to them can be really important to understanding how to improve the supports or how to change the supports that are necessary. It really pleases me that I didn't feel welcome only has a 6% response rate, but it also saddens me that 6% of the students didn't feel welcome. That I would hope would be 0. But inconvenience in terms of timing and location is huge, especially for students who have jobs, transportation issues, et cetera, or are in extracurriculars like sports. Gotta love the honesty of I wish I had, but I just never got around to it. How do we encourage them to not procrastinate on taking advantage of it? And then thinking about their wish list, what do they wish they had? I think students often highlight the wanting experienced students to be peer mentors. To Auspicia's point about having students come back and talk about their experiences once they're in college and how their high school career helped prepare them for that. It can also be really powerful to have students who took a class previously serve as mentors and advisors to kind of guide folks through the process. And these are all, these are part of our, our partner surveys, but I think they're also questions that can very easily be asked of students in another format. Reasons why students have thought about dropping. Attrition is a really big thing that we think about with our schools. There are, and I know you guys look at credit hours taken versus earned, and there might be various reasons why they are not earned, but it may be because they've dropped. And so looking at, those different pieces, I didn't feel like I belong in the class. I wasn't confident in my ability to succeed. I felt like my teacher discouraged me. Again, I'm really happy that's at the bottom of the list, but man, I wish that was a 0 and not an 8%. It's always horrific when we have educators who are discouraging students. Often done from a place of love, right? They're not necessarily meaning to discourage. They think they're protecting a student, but those are the types of things that we really want to look at and understand and think about changing in order to make sure that students are having a successful experience. And students were able to pick their top 3 on this one, so they were not able to pick every single option. It was kind of the top 3 reasons that they were thinking about dropping. And the final data points that I'll share are some of the barriers that students are experiencing. And we see that for Low-income students and students of color are actually not, in some cases, they're not experiencing the barrier any more than their peers that are middle and high income and white and Asian students. In some cases they are, certainly the general knowledge barrier. They just don't know enough about the programs to take advantage of them. But the welcome barrier is the other place that we see a larger percentage. They don't feel welcome, they don't feel like they're open access, even if they are in terms of policy and procedure, they don't feel that way. We have found that for our students of color and low-income students, it takes from 3 to 5 individual touch points for them to really resonate that you're talking to them and not just everyone else. I know I'm guilty of standing in front of my class of Algebra 2 students and saying, okay, your next class is pre-calculus and these are the options, et cetera, and just talking to the whole class. Never thinking to take the time to talk to each individual student about why they might make one choice or another. And I think we do that often. Counselors are coming in through classes, right? They have huge caseloads, and they're coming in and doing a presentation and they're out the door. And one student is sitting there going, yeah, that message was for me, and someone else is going, oh, they're talking about everybody else in the class, not me. So really wanting to ensure that we think of different ways to engage with students so that we can overcome these barriers and ensure that they know we're talking to them and not just the other people in the room.
Thank you, Angie.
Yeah.
So as we wrap up before lunch today, I just want to go back to our opening learning objectives and really reminding us that we are tasked with interrupting inequitable designs in our system, inequitable practices, and creating inclusive conditions for all. Really that untapped potential now is lying in those students that come from low-income backgrounds. So that is where we see the opportunity gap to really help those students feel welcome and support them in enrolling in concurrent enrollment courses and being successful. This is a quote from Catherine Neckerman from the National Equity Project. And she talks about a path of least resistance that really perpetuates inequities in our system. I think that it's also true that the small things that we do as educators, the words of encouragement, the way that we support young people are really the ways that we can make a difference, that sometimes we don't know that we have that much power. But the feedback that we get from young people is that it is a person, a trusted adult in the schools that really they see as the one who is encouraging them and supporting them to enroll in more rigorous classes and to persist through difficulty. And lastly, as we close out today, I just want to say thank you again for this opportunity to talk to you about our experiences as educators, as a principal, as a high school designer, in our work with concurrent enrollment, AP and IB students and teachers. It is truly an honor to be here with you today. And I want to thank again Sid, Holly, everyone for being participants and allowing us to talk about our experiences and to really commend you for the fantastic work that you are doing here in the state of Utah. So thank you again. And thank you to my colleague Angie from Equal Opportunity Schools. I've put our email addresses up on this last slide, and we will be around during lunch if you have questions for us. And we hope you have a fantastic day.